Welcome to Lesson 15 of the course, Cooperative Individualism, the Third Way to the Just Society. This lesson is titled, Education That Respects Diversity. A question: should we be pleased with how our children are educated? Are there systemic reforms that would result in an adult citizenry that has a deeper understanding of both the rights and duties of citizenship? One important legacy of the 19th century reform initiatives, whether democratic, utilitarian, communitarian, or statist, has been an almost universal reliance on education to raise the living standards of the unpropertied. After a period of limited success with religious and philanthropic experiments in education, society after society created systems of publicly funded education. In the United States, this system was decentrally structured and supported by broad-based taxes, collected primarily from owners of real estate. The motivations to establish universal education were both humanitarian and utilitarian. Industrial landlordism could expand only so far using unskilled labor. Technical and managerial positions required individuals who possessed not merely basic literacy, but sound foundations in the mechanical and administrative arts. German reforms of the mid to late 19th century sought to produce an educated citizenry for its bureaucratic, militaristic, and industrial state. Britain was struggling with an increasingly rigid class division between the propertied and the unpropertied, and ended up with the distinctly two-tiered educational system that continues today. A real concern of many 19th century Americans then in the majority was that the millions of immigrants arriving from southern, central, and eastern Eurasia would jeopardize the existing system by introducing different societal norms and political values. Providing public education was a means of Americanizing new arrivals and bringing them into the mainstream. A system of land-grant colleges established during the century provided additional opportunities for individuals who settled far from the urban centers to gain exposure to a liberal education in the Western classics and in agricultural practice. An explosion in both public and private funds made available over the last 70 years for scholarships and financial assistance has opened the doors to a college or university education for tens of millions of U.S. citizens and foreign visitors. Similar and even more aggressive programs were implemented in many of the other social democracies. Despite the remarkable achievements of the educational systems as a group, the need for reform has become apparent even to the staunchest of defenders. In the United States, far too many young people leave our secondary schools ill-equipped for the responsibilities of citizenship. Millions more do not even complete a full 12 years of formal childhood schooling. One of the reforms discussed frequently today is that of choice, meaning that parents and youngsters ought to have many more options in the selection of an educational opportunity than have traditionally been available. For the most part, choice has historically involved the one public school within walking distance or to which bus service was provided, or paying tuition to attend a parochial school. Access to privately operated schools has been largely restricted to youngsters whose families could afford the expense of high tuition and, in many cases, full-time boarding. At the same time, all owners of real estate contribute via the tax system to the cost of publicly administered schools. We should consider a needs-based voucher system, under which children are supported by some minimum amount of public scholarship according to household income. I believe this will create a far more competitive educational environment and stimulate the design of programs directed to the individual needs of children rather than to the needs and priorities of administrative bodies. As we examine the opportunities to reform our educational system, We ought also to consider a gradual plan to phase out publicly operated schools altogether. Moving to privatization is desirable. However, there are extraordinary dangers in the creation of a system of for-profit schools that are also owned by disinterested shareholders whose primary interest is in profit maximization. A far better form of ownership is the professional association. Teachers who share the same educational philosophy should be encouraged to come together, much the same way as attorneys or physicians do, to form a school. These professionals would then hire administrators to help implement policies the teachers decide upon. In our publicly operated and parochial systems, as well as the overwhelming majority of privately operated schools, the individuals most directly involved in the process of education are merely hired help who have nominal input into the development of curriculum, selection of new staff, or the establishment of standards. At the college and university level, many of the same problems exist. Professors are rewarded not on the basis of their effectiveness as teachers, or if you prefer, facilitators of learning, but for their status as researchers or scholars. How is it possible that students attending prestigious universities in the United States can complete their undergraduate requirements without ever encountering an actual full-time professor in the classroom? Undergraduate education, arguably the place where our best instructors are needed, is too often left in the hands of graduate students or part-time faculty. The institution of tenure has also isolated professors from the rigors of competitive pressures existing in most other societal arenas. Here again, the more appropriate structure for colleges and universities is to have the professors associated as equal partners, each required to perform at a high level, and that high level determined in large part by their ability to attract and retain paying students. And now we've reached the end of lesson 15.